Hello, teachers. I want to show you how to structure your literacy block. Some of you might be feeling really overwhelmed with the best practices for how to teach your students how to read and write. So I want to share the way that I do it. It frees up your time so that you can work with small groups, which, let's face it, that's the best way they learn. Richard Allington once said in a workshop that I attended that whole class instruction is only good for about 30 seconds, and after that you aren't meeting the needs of your students. So let's dive into how I structure my literacy block. So this is how I start my day. I do start the first 15 minutes with just a soft start where they come in, they do their morning jobs, and then they go to play centers. They can do anything they want. And then we move into our literacy block after that. So our morning jobs would include putting on our inside shoes, putting your name on the board. They have little pictures of themselves that they draw. It has magnets on the back, and then I have a question on the board. Sometimes it's a yes or no question. Sometimes it's giving maybe 2 or 3 choices. It might be something like, do you have a dog? Would you rather write or draw? Just little questions like that gets them thinking about something for the day. It's teaching them how to do surveys, getting a little bit of math in there. It's getting them to read. If they can't read it, they usually ask a friend. Usually we have someone in our class who can read it, or they come and ask me. It gives me that moment of opportunity to connect with them as well in the morning, which is super important for our readers. Then they have to put a chair at their desk. They keep a water bottle on their desk. Yes, I allow water on their desk. It has to be just water, and then they're allowed to have it. And I find it's just hydration is super important for learning, so I like to have it right then and there. If we're doing an activity like painting, they know to put their water bottles on the floor beside their desk, and then they're out of their way. So it works really well for me. And then they change their home reading book if they remember to bring it that day, and then they get a little short center time. They know that they can't take all the toys out and make a huge mess. It has to be something that can be cleaned up quickly when I shake my little tambourine at 8:45 so that we can get started with our literacy block at that time. I also use that time if they need to use the washroom before we start the day. Then at 8:45, I do dictation practice. So I teach them the sounds pattern that we're working on for the week. And then I have 5 words that go with that sound that we practice. So I will say the word aloud, and then they write it on their individual whiteboards that they keep in their desk with their whiteboard marker. And I get those tiny little erasers. I get them off of Temu really cheap. And then they just throw them out at the end of the year. So that works really well for us. So I give them a word, and then they write it on their whiteboard. I make sure they all have a chance to get it done. There's no talking. It's just quiet while everybody has a chance. And then I say, okay, tell me how to spell. And then I say the word, and they tell me 1 letter at a time, and I write it on the whiteboard in the front of the room, and then they check their mini whiteboards. If you don't have mini whiteboards, you could use a notebook, scrap pieces of paper. You could use little sentence strips or whatever you have to write them on. That works out just fine. And then we say the next word. So I'll tell them the next word, they write it down, and then the next word, and so on until we've gone through our 5 words. And then as they are erasing their boards and putting them away, it gives me opportunity to grab my next materials. And then they know that once they've cleaned up and they go to the carpet, so it gives us both a little bit of transition time. Every day the routines are the same, so they know exactly what to do. It really helps with classroom management as well. So after that, I start off with a story every day. So about 9 o'clock, once we finish our dictation, give or take, a few minutes, depending on how long we go with that. Sometimes I will add a sentence in that dictation as well, so that can take an extra minute. But roughly 9 o'clock, we start off with our story. Now, Monday to Friday, I read the same story during this literacy block because I really want to work on those comprehension skills, those higher level thinking, the predicting, the connecting, inferring, making opinions, extending their thinking about this story, all the things, right? So this example that I'm showing is using one of my book companion activity packs that I have in my TPT store, Teaching Literacy with Deb. This one's Carla's Glasses. So it's also a great sell story if you're wanting to teach some social emotional learning, because it basically, Carla is just being super kind, trying to include a friend who's feeling a little bit anxious because he has to get glasses. He likes to fit in and not stand out, whereas Carla loves to stand out and be different. So she was hoping she would need glasses, but she didn't need glasses, but her friend did. So she made him feel welcome and included by making fun glasses for the whole class the day that he had to wear his glasses to school. So the first day, on the Monday, I would do a prediction activity where I read a little bit of the story, and then I have a prompting question to ask about what they think is going to happen next, something specific. And then they would record their answers on a sheet like the example I'm showing you here. So in my book companions, I do have differentiated worksheets. Some of the pages just have a space to draw a picture. Some of them are like this where they have 4 lines, and then I have another version where there's 6 lines to write on. So depending on the needs of your students, my book companions all do have variations of how many lines they have on the page so that we can meet the needs of all our students, right? Because some students will see these lines and they'll just shut down, whereas maybe they need a picture to draw. You might have a student who needs to do more writing because they're more capable. Well, we don't want to limit them, so we want to just have that space for them because we know that students are going to turn it over and write on the back to write more. So just setting them up for where they are at is super helpful. So this would be what I do every day with a different comprehension strategy. So on Tuesday, I would read the same story. I would read the end of the story this time because I'm going to read the whole thing through, because on Monday, I only read part of the story and then they predicted and then they move on. So we don't actually usually get to finish that story on the Monday, but they know it's coming on Tuesday where they get to hear the rest of the story. And then we can talk about if their prediction was correct or not. Some days on Monday, I'll do a visualization where I read part of the story and I have them visualize what they see, and I don't want to show them the pictures or read the whole story for that one either. So Tuesday we get into it, we read the whole book. This time we're going to make connections in this example I'm showing you. So connecting something that's happening in the story to something that's happening in their life. You can see this example in my companion is just a blank page for those kids who might shut down if they have lines on their pages, or maybe it's the beginning of kindergarten and they don't know how to write yet, but they can definitely show you their ideas using a picture. So this works really well. Moving on to Wednesday, we're making inferences. You can decide if you read the whole story again, or if you just want to read the part of the story that goes with the part that you want to make the inference from. And so that would be my Wednesday activity. And again, we still do dictation first thing and then we go into this. So those routines are really important to help with classroom management. It really helps those anxious children, helps your students who maybe don't cope well with change and they really need that structure to thrive. So having the same thing every day helps them. It helps you because, we have all those decisions to make in a day as teachers. And so if we have one less decision to make about what order we're going to teach in, it just helps us not burn out as well. The next day we would do forming and opinions. Now, most of the time I would have 5 questions that are single thinking questions. Usually my opinions I would do on the Friday, but in this case, I wanted to show you an additional activity that I have in this companion book for the Friday. So this would be my Thursday activity, is just asking the children, in this case, what materials do you think would be good for the pretend glasses that the children made to wear to school. And in this example, I have very specific questions because I know that in some school districts, you have to get the kids to deep into specific comprehension questions, asking them for specific details from the story. So that's what this piece does. I think generally it's not best practice to always do these kinds of questions because I feel like it just takes away the joy of the story when they have to look for very specific things. I do prefer those bigger open-ended questions. I think when we read as adults, we don't necessarily look for very specific things. We look for that overall message or that big picture. And so I think those other strategies really help us to dig into their comprehension bank better than these traditional specific questions, but I know that districts do ask for them. So that's why I'm showing you this example of what you might do on the Friday. That way they've had 4 full days to look into the book with you, and then one last read through the book, and then hopefully they can answer these specific questions on that Friday. So that's how I start my comprehension piece. So next, the children know to go into their phonics activities. Now the phonics, I might differentiate them. For example, maybe some of my students are still working just on letter names, letter sounds. So maybe that's all they're doing for their phonics block. Maybe they are watching videos. On my Teaching with Deb YouTube channel, I do have videos for students that they can just watch, and it really helps them just learn the basics of reading. So I will do that for those students. And then some of my students might be ready for, what most of the class is doing. And then I would have little books made for them in advance. So I do prefer doing booklets where all the pages are stapled together. And so I'm not handing out individual pages. The students just know to go to the phonics bin, find their book, and then they just get going to it. If they aren't sure what to do, they might quietly ask a friend. If the friend doesn't know, then they might be able to interrupt me in my small group, but it kind of depends where I'm at. So I make sure it's clear about what they should do. I mean, they could skip this one, go to the next activity, and then come back to it as well. So we go straight into phonics. These phonics, I'm working on a new series here. They may be finished by the time you watch this video, but it's color by digraph, animal phonics. So it's a cute little activity set where they start off by matching the words. It builds their vocabulary skills, and then they have to color based on the word. So they have to figure out what the picture is, like chess, and then they find the word chess in the picture, and then they color it brown and so forth. So fun little phonics activities. I like them to be engaged and have fun. I like them to be independent. So those are the types of activities that I am looking for so that I can work with those small groups without interruption. That's where the magic of the learning really happens for our students. After that, they know to go into journal writing. So sometimes I'll just say you can write whatever you want in your own journal. But after a while, they kind of get stuck and they don't know what to do. So I've made these journal prompt pages as well in my companion activity packs. And so this little prompt goes with a theme that's in the story, and then they can write about that. Again, in my activity packs, they are differentiated. So there's the 3 versions of the pages for journal prompts. If you are low on photocopying, you could just simply write the journal prompt up on the board, and they could write it in their notebooks as well. So that helps our photocopying. I know some districts are limited on how much they can photocopy. So always writing out things on the board is an option for any of these as well. If you have those really quick finishers who are done everything just like that, I put in parameters for them. They have to have certain details in their pictures, more details in their writing. If they're finishing really quickly, I would give them more lines on the page, perhaps even a second page that's fully lined with it. And I do have that fully lined pages in my activity packs as well that are interlined for primary students. That's super helpful. And then maybe you want to have them do a journal prompt and a free write in their own journal as well. So lots of activity options to keep them busy so you can work with those small groups without interruptions. And then I also include early finishers activities in my activity pack. So I usually have a little board game. They can play quietly with a friend. I have a word search in my activity packs that use vocabulary from the story. Some of them have bookmarks where they can think about the main idea in the story and create a bookmark out of it. Some of them have color by number using things from the story, that theme, right? Like this one, the color by number is little glasses that they can color and decorate following the color by number code that I give. So lots of ideas for early finishers, keeping them busy, keeping them engaged, keeping them learning, right? Traditionally, we've done those center activities where they read the room, they write the room, and do all those things. I tried everything under the sun to keep them engaged in those activities, but honestly, it was such a disaster as far as classroom management went that I moved away from that into more engaging things like these activities that I'm presenting to you. because the other ones were just, and they weren't really getting anything, right? They spent more time fooling around or secretly figuring out how they can be off task without the teacher knowing, right? Because they just weren't engaged and they were interested. And I had everything. I had keyboards where they could type out their words. I had Play-Doh where they could form letters and spell the words in Play-Doh. I had Lego to spell words. I had so many different things that they could do, but it didn't sustain them very long. Whereas these activities in my book companion here, it sustains them. They are engaged. They are not bothering me in my small group instruction. You know, you've got those learners who do need the extra help, and that's fine. We can manage those students, no problem. But when they are all fooling around, they're all off task doing literacy centers, it really doesn't help us. Now, you may be thinking, wow, that's a long time for them to keep working nonstop. That is not what I do. We will go outside and do a quick little running break. I have a little basketball court outside my room, so we do 3 laps around the basketball court. We might pause to practice gratitude. So I'll tell them 3 things I am thankful for, and then they have to get up and go tell someone 3 things they are thankful for. It gets them moving, gets them talking. Then we might do maybe a YouTube quick little movement break. I love Coach Corey Martin's YouTube videos. They're fantastic, but there's so many out there. You just search up movement break and you will find so many ideas. So that's how kind of we break up that little task. Also, if you get your students and they're coming to you because they all of a sudden they all have to go to the bathroom, they probably don't have to go to the bathroom. They're ready for a movement break. And so that's my cue to go, okay, we need to stop. We all need to do a class movement break. We move our bodies and then we come back together. We might take a breath before we go back to work. And it works really well. So some weeks, or even maybe sometimes on a Friday, I'll switch and do story writing. So sometimes I'll do story writing workshops with loose parts. And sometimes I'll be more specific and guide them according to the story that we're working on. So I might use a little graphic organizer for story parts, like the one that you see here. I might connect it to the story. So I might look at the setting, look at the characters, think about what's in the story, and then have them come up with something that's related to the story that they can write about. If we give them free choice, it's just too open-ended. And we know that story writing is the most challenging piece of writing that we can have our students do. So we want to guide them and set them up for success and break it into parts for them. We would think about the problem in the story that we read for that week, and then they would write their own problem based on the story, and then the solution. So the solution in the story, and then what can we do to create our solution. I do have a story writing pack that's in my Teachers Pay Teachers store as well. If you want to check that out, it breaks it down really well too. If you're just looking to do story writing, it has all kinds of brainstorming pages, brainstorming ideas, all kinds of things in there. So feel free to check that out as well. Then I have, in my book companions, I have different writing pages they can use as well to write their stories. And I hope that I've inspired you to have a more successful running literacy block in your classroom where your students are on task, they're engaged. It frees up your time to work with those students who need you the most, right? Because small groups where we can really dive into where they're at, or whether we're pulling our students for reading time, we're going to read books with them, we're going to read decodables with them, or whatever it is that they need. Maybe we're going to work on writing with them. Maybe we're going to work on letter sounds with them. Maybe we're going to work how to blend and segment our words. Whatever it is your small groups need, I would differentiate them, break them into homogeneous groups, and then pull them and work with them while your students are engaged with the rest of these activities. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And my email is deb@teachingliteracywithdeb.com, and that's where you can find me. Have an amazing day, teachers. Bye for now.